You're listening to Titular Characters with your host, the adorable Eva Webb.
Let's talk nerdy things like comic books and superheroes with some nerdy peeps, writers, cartoonists, and so much more. So stick around and have some fun with the lovely and adorable Eva Webb.
Erica-Schultz is a Ringo Award-nominated comic book writer, editor, instructor, and letterer. She's the creator of Forgotten Home, the co-creator of Strange Tales with Claire Connolly, co-creator of M3 with Vincente Alexar, and creator of 12 Devils Dancing from Action Lab Danger Zone. Her current Kickstarter for the Deadliest Bouquet just reached its $20,000 funding goal. And she's back, here to talk about comics, production, and so much more. Erica, it's good to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me back.
I wanted to congratulate you on a successful Kickstarter with your latest book.
It's, whether you fund in, 5 minutes or 5 weeks, it's still kind of a stressful process. So I am glad that we're funded, and we've got some awesome stretch goals coming up too.
That is amazing. One of the topics that just keeps coming up in these interviews is collaborations. And I was thinking about it. You have worked in advertising with your background, so you've done like a lot of in-person collaborations as well as working in comics and working on tons and tons of remote collaborations. Do you have a thought on which one you prefer?
I think that they both have their place. I think that without the internet and things like that, when I started in advertising, it was 1999. So, yes, we had clients, all over the country, all over the world, but, and yes, there was like Skype and stuff, but people didn't, think about collaborating overseas or anything like that as easily. And so it was kind of like now it's commonplace. I was editing a project with a writer named Christian Carnouche, and Christian was in France, and one of the artists was in Paraguay, and another artist was like in California, and another one was in Australia. And it's just, we were like coordinating this thing, and it was like this multinational global anthology that I was helping with. And it's just crazy because now it's like to think about working with somebody in another country, in another time zone. It's just, you shrug, you're like, okay, yeah, you just make it happen. I do like collaborating in person just because there's something like tactile about it, not like you're like touching the person, but there's something like cool to be able to like hand a notebook back and forth to somebody. Having a Google Doc that you're both jumping on doesn't have quite the same sort of inspiration as, like handing a note, like scribbling, a sketch down and then handing it off to somebody. But I think collaboration is such a huge part of comics to begin with, that if you're not able to sort of find a workaround through using technology, then you might want to think about doing everything for yourself then, because you're going to have to sort of find a way to collaborate and make it work. Forgotten Home, which was the book that came out last year, our colorist was in Massachusetts, the line artist was in Italy, the cover artist was in Oklahoma. With this book, with The Deadliest Bouquet, we have the line artist is in Italy, the colorist is in Peru, and I'm in I'm in New Jersey, and the editor is in New York. So the only two people on the same area is James, the editor, and I, whereas Corolla is in Italy and Gab is in Peru. So like the time zones are all wackadoo.
That's crazy. So, do you actually sync your time zones when you're working on a collaboration, or do you just sort of stifle it throughout the day? How's it work?
Well, it depends. I mean, if I'm working on a project with another project that hasn't been announced yet, with an artist who's in Spain and another writer who's I think an hour behind. I think Central Time. So we tend to be okay in terms of like, unless it's like we're having like we want to have like a Zoom call or something like that. Um, we pretty much just, it's a 24-hour day. So if I send you an email and it ends up being like 4 o'clock in the morning, your time, get to it when you get to it, kind of thing. I think that it's, unless you're going to have like a face to face, not in person, obviously, on like Zoom or Skype or whatever, unless you're going to have like a face to face, the time zone doesn't even matter. I mean, I'm the idiot who rolls over in the middle of the night and like reads an email from somebody, in England or France or Holland or whatever, when it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, our time, my time. And I'll be like, oh, somebody, you're having your morning coffee and you like check your phone, you check your emails, and then you type back. But morning coffee for them is like 3 a.m. for me. So, but I'm the one who'll be like, oh, my phone's dying. Oh, I gotta get up in the middle. So my husband's been telling me that I can't sleep with my phone next to the bed because then the light
Yeah.
goes, and then he gets groggy, and then it just turns into a whole thing.
I completely understand. I've spent so long working in IT that, you know, I wake up when my phone goes off at 2 a.m. because you never know, you know.
Yeah.
You've been really productive and really prolific lately, putting out these indie books, and it
I've
is
been trying.
neat. It is just really cool because there's always something new by Erica-Schultz out there. And I was wondering, if you were if you were going to give advice to a new artist or a team that was producing a comic book, um, what would you tell them to avoid production delays and all the kind of stuff that inevitably so many indie books run into?
I would say that if you yourself are not a very sort of type A personality, um, to see if you can't get an editor who is kind of editor slash project manager. Um, because what a lot of times happens is you tend to have a lot of, you tend to sort of bottleneck, and then it all falls down onto one person's shoulders, and that's never good. So what you should do is kind of do like a stagger. So the writer should always be at least one script ahead. So if my artist is working on the line work for, let's say, issue 2, the writer should already have issue 3 completely written and approved and everything. So the writer should always be one script ahead. Then what should happen is, as the line artist is putting in the page, you're submitting the pages, make sure that you have a central location for everything. So whether it's a Google Drive or a Sugar Sync or a Dropbox or whatever, make sure there is a central location. So this way, when the line artist drops the inks into the Dropbox or whatever, Dropbox, sponsor me, please, because I always use you. So when the line artist drops the inks in, then the colorist can grab them, but also the letterer. So the letterer can start looking at the pages and sort of blocking out where the balloons are going to go. Um, and then this way, what happens is, the writer and the letterer can work on the dialogue. And then when the colors come back, because obviously the colors are going to take longer, when the colors come back, with luck, the lettering should already be pretty close to lock. And then the letterer will just have to and this is where things vary, because depending on if you're working with a publisher, what'll sometimes happen is the colorist is going to work independently, and then the production artist is going to be putting everything together. But on indie projects, a lot of times the letterer is the production artist as well. So not only are they putting the letters in, but they're also putting the book together. So then, the letterer can at least letter on the black and whites and get that, blocked out. And then when the colors come in, swap the black and white art for the color art. And then, whether what would usually happen is you would usually like output a PDF file and then send it to a printer, or send it to an editor for like one more pass before it goes to print. Or if you're like doing something with Comixology, before it goes to Comixology to go up on their server.
Does Comixology require like a vastly different plan for your book? Do you have to take it into account beforehand?
Well, anybody can submit to Comixology Submit. That's kind of like Webtoons Canvas. Anybody can submit. To be part of Comixology Originals, you have to get you are invited to submit a story to pitch for them. And when you do Comixology Submit, they have the parameters. There's, certain ways to formulate your PDF, and you send it along and you upload it, and then you can monetize your content. With Comixology Originals, they do have a few more hoops that you got to jump through, but it's a different paradigm. So not only is your story monetized, but Comixology is funding your story. So, you have a couple more hoops to jump through. But, I've been very, very lucky in the sense that I am pretty technically inclined. I say this now, and then watch, my computer's going to like die on me, and I don't know how to I don't know how to fix it. I'll be like, Eva, IT tech support.
I could totally help. By the way, if you ever have those kinds of problems, just give me a call.
Don't even joke, because I will. You're gonna regret saying that. I'm gonna be that too. Email. So yeah. So I'm for the most part, I'm pretty technically inclined. So when you get the sort of parameters from Comixology Originals, I was the one like putting the book together for the most part, and then being able to send it out. Like for Forgotten Home, it was an 8-issue series, and then the trade paperback, which was obviously collecting all 8 issues, but then also had back matter. So we got all of that together. But the Comixology makes it pretty simple in the sense that like they have tutorials with like screenshots and everything like that to really make it pretty easy to just sort of follow the directions, to make sure that like when you're outputting your PDF, you have to output it a specific way. You have to make sure that your because Comixology, when you like double tap on an image and it zooms in, you don't want it to be like all JPEGy. You want it to be like nice and clean and crisp. So that would be another piece of advice. I would tell creators, do not, even whether you're working traditionally or digitally, don't work on anything under 400 DPI. And some publishers will want line art at 600 DPI. And whether you're doing it digitally or you're scanning traditional pages, some publishers want line art at 600 DPI and then colors at like 4 or 450. But yeah, I would say don't work below 450.
Isn't 600 DPI the print standard?
Not necessarily. There are a lot of like print on demand printers that will take 300. But they usually want 400 or above. 600 DPI, I've seen a lot of people do, because a lot of printers want, because they want the line art, because you know how like everybody's printing now these like hardcover prestige books with like all the line art and this, that, and the next thing. They're printing at like real size. So you'll have like an 11-17 book. You know, you want like nice clean lines for that. But yeah, I mean, if you're working with like a super professional printer and you're doing like advertising stuff, they would want, you know, really high resolution, especially with photographic stuff.
Oh, sure.
And, you know, I'm dating myself, but this is when we were like, you know, back in the day when like 12 megapixel cameras was like a big deal. You know, now it's like you get a 12 megapixel pixel camera on like a, you know, a 10-year-old phone, you know, but that was like always like a big thing, making sure you had like really high resolution. But I mean, I haven't been in advertising since, well, I haven't been on the agency side of advertising since
Nice.
2008. So,
You know, I think you and I started working in advertising at about the same time, actually. I started in 97 working on websites and stuff like that.
yes, you know, like all the old school, like bullshit, if I can
Totally.
say that. So yeah, I mean, I remember before 360 advertising, when people were like, "Oh, we want to make sure it's 360." I was like, "What the hell do you mean 360? What's 360 advertising?" Well, it has to be print, radio, television, web. You know, there's this new thing called YouTube, and we want to have YouTube ads, but they're not going to be standard 60s or standard 30s. They can be anything you want. You know, where like you'd have like a 10-second ID or a 15-second ad and everything. It would be like a 15-second or a 30-second or whatever. Then, you know, they would be like, oh, we're going to do a 31-second ad, or we're going to do a 34-second ad. It doesn't matter because it's web. It's like, wait, what? You have to have parameters. Like, come on. And I remember my producers being driven up a wall because like, okay, so you book somebody to do a 30-second spot. They're getting paid for a 30-second spot. You can't ask them to give you more footage so that you can cut a 34. Like, I mean, that's going to affect the budget. And I remember the producers just being like, do they not get it? I'm like, look, you're the producer. I'm the art director. You just, you know, I'm sorry, the budget is on you. Like, I'll buy you a beer at the end of the day, but I can't help you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So back to your book. So it's got a really neat family dynamic. It's about a bunch of sisters.
Yes. 3 sisters who are estranged. Their mom was an assassin and trained them to be sort of assassin spy kind of gals. And they have a very complicated relationship with their mom. They have a very complicated relationship with each other. And when their mom's murdered, they come back home and try and solve the murder and get into a lot of fights because there's a whole lot of unresolved things that come back up.
And I understand there's also Nazi killing in the book.
See, that's the funny thing is that like it's in the log line and everybody's like, this is a book where every page is going to be a Nazi killed. It's not. Yes, we do see a Nazi get killed. But the story is more about the sisters. And I know I'm probably doing a disservice to the book. I should just probably be like, yes, Nazis killing every page. Which is, yes, as you're right, killing Nazis is a very good thing. But yeah, so it's mostly about these sisters and sort of this generational trauma. And but there's plenty of ass kicking. I just got the colors back for for chapter 2 from Gab Contreras, and I posted some of these images on Instagram. It's the Deadliest Bouquet comic on Instagram, and the youngest of the 3 sisters is a woman named Violet, and Violet is batshit. Like there's no other way to describe her. She thrives on chaos. If she's bored, she will pick a fight and she just might stab you. Literally. So there's at the end of the first chapter, she picks a fight with somebody. And then in the second chapter, we see the result of that fight. And it is just brilliantly done by Carola Borelli and Gab Contreras. It's brilliant. And I was laughing, and I always find it really weird when I laugh at my own jokes. Like, I think, oh God, whatever, like, you're so pretentious. But I was looking at this and I thought to myself, I was like, well, I can laugh at this because I didn't do it wholeheartedly. Like, obviously Gab and Carola had a huge hand in this. So I can laugh at it because it's not like I'm laughing at my own joke. I'm laughing at a joke that they were part of as well. But
There
I
you
was
go.
I
That's
was
a good
looking at the
workaround.
pages. Yeah, exactly. So I was looking at the pages and I just started chuckling to myself. I was like, this is just so freaking great. I love it. I love it. So
That's awesome.
throwing high heel shoes at people and just punching the hell out of them.
Where do you start with the world building? Like, do you start with autobiographical elements? Where does it come from? Where do you find that creative spark?
I never know how to answer that question. The answer that I give usually scares people, but I listen to the voices in my head. So it's either mental illness or divine intervention. I don't know. From an academic perspective, because when I teach writing, I basically teach, you come to a story one of three ways. You either start creating the world, you start creating the characters, you start creating the plot. And whichever one of those three that you start with, you have to make sure that the other two complements and fits with it, but also challenges everything. So if you start with, your characters, you have to put your characters in a situation, i.e. your plot, that is going to fit them, but also is going to challenge them. And you have to make that plot and storyline exist within a world that is going to, that is going to house a plot like that, but is also going to create conflict and challenges. So with this story, I pretty much started with the premise of, I wanted to do something that was a little more what I would consider my time or our time. Like, I do feel kind of out of time in the 2020s. I don't understand like anything anymore. I said this to my husband the other day. I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand people anymore. Like, I don't get TikTok and all that stuff. So I kind of wanted to sort of harken back to for me, a more comfortable time, which was just the 90s. I graduated college in 99. And that was like my heyday. I also wanted to, because the story is sort of anchored in World War II, I wanted to make sure that it was plausible to have these young women have their grandparents be, part of the French resistance in World War II. So I wanted to make sure that the story, just time chronologically, would sit in the 90s. And then the other reason why I wanted to do the 90s was because technology. I mean, it's so easy to ruin a mystery because you're carrying a computer in your pocket. I wanted there to be technology that was going to lag. I wanted there to be things that would stymie the investigation simply because, technology hadn't caught up. Like everybody talks about DNA and the OJ trial. Yes, but that took months and months and months. You weren't getting DNA by the end of the week, So I wanted to be able to sort of draw out the investigation of Jasmine, the mother's death, and make it plausible. And a good way to do that would be to put it in the 90s. And there's a very, sort of funny opposite moment that happens where you have, nowadays, if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't have a cell phone. Whereas in 1998, if somebody did have a cell phone, it's, oh my God, I can't believe you have a cell phone. You know what I mean? So, so I thought that was kind of a fun way to sort of, take a typical trope from now and sort of turn it on its head. For ye olden people like us, we're remembering times like I was joking with my Kubert School students and they couldn't believe that I remember a time before Cool Ranch
Oh my
Doritos.
God. Was there a time before Cool Ranch Doritos?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yes, there was. There was. I don't even. I had to explain to one of them what a cassette tape was, and then I said something about an 8-track, and I was like, I'm not going to go into what an 8-track is. I'm not doing it.
I'm not
Not
old enough
going
to
there.
remember what an 8-track was. I remember, I vaguely remember carts from that radio course that I took in college, which were sort of like 8-tracks, but they were loopy.
I was born in '77, and we had two old cars growing up. And one of them did have an 8-track in it. And my and my brother's wife, I remember her telling me this story. Her first car was this old, beat up, like wood paneling, um, whatchamacallit, station wagon, and it had an 8-track, and she had like three 8-track tapes that she could play. And anytime she would bring it to the mechanic, they would always laugh at her because of her like old hoopty car. She's like, "Don't make fun of my 8-tracks." So I should actually try and find some 8-tracks on eBay and get her one for Christmas just
Nice.
for fun.
That sounds amazing. How do you know the difference, like when at the idea phase, between something that is just gonna blow your audience away and something that won't?
Well, I mean, I think it's actually after the idea phase because I mean, there's good ideas, but there are great ideas and terrible executions. So I think it has to come after the idea phase. So what I usually do is I usually write down ideas, whether it's, a world, a character, a plot, whatever. And if it's a fleeting thought, I'll write it down in my notebook. I will always have a notebook with me. I will always have pen and paper with me. If I have to write on my arm, I will write on my arm. If I have to write on somebody else's arm, I will write on somebody else's arm. Um, so what I usually do is I'll like sort of sit down and sort of aggregate all of these, um, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and see what really has legs. I think everything can have legs to a certain extent, but I think that, it doesn't always show up fully formed. Like, how Athena sort of was birthed from Zeus's headache, fully formed. Not every idea is going to be that lucky. Some ideas, take a little more time. Like this, I mean, the Deadliest Bouquet took a lot of research because I'm like, okay, well, if I'm doing something in 1998, I have to make sure that I am 100%, technologically sound and everything. Like, because there were certain things that I thought were from '98, but they ended up being like 2001. I'm like, okay, I can't do that. Um, and a couple of other things that, in 1998, like was too late for that, so I had to, that in 1998, the technology was there's already solved that problem. So I had to go back. So this story did take a good amount of research. But what I tend to do is I create a chronological timeline from the idea where I said, okay, so what happened before the comic starts? Like, what's the lead up to the comic? Then, that centerpiece is, for the most part, the comic itself. And then what's the aftermath? And I just create like a chronological timeline. And then I decide what the comic is actually going to showcase. So the comic is going to, let's say there's like a terrible, it's a post-apocalyptic comic. Let's say that. And my timeline will show what happened to lead up to the nuclear war that then created this apocalypse. And then the apocalypse itself. And then what happens after the story ends. And then I decide, what am I really going to showcase? Am I going to show pre-war times? Or is the story just going to mention the war and not actually show it? Am I going to show only the apocalypse? And, are we not going to talk about the before times at all? And that has a lot to do with the characters. And, are these characters who were born after the nuclear holocaust? or are these characters who were born before? And if they were born before, then they obviously have memories of what things were like before. Therefore, they're going to react to this world in a different way than somebody who's never known anything but this world.
So I was going to ask you actually if the process is any different when you're working on your own book versus an established property.
Yes and no. An established property, usually you have precedents that you can sort, a character. If I was doing a Spider-Man story, I don't have to worry about, Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, because they already have their backstories already existing. So I don't have to worry about sort of beating myself up over that. But so when I'm doing a creator-owned story, I have to start from scratch. But there's still, okay, so if I'm doing a Spider-Girl story or Spider-Gwen story, all right, well, I have to make sure that I have, which previous story arc am I jumping off from? So let's say, there was a major storyline called Spider Island years ago. So, okay, so am I doing a story that's right off of Spider Island? Okay, so then I got to go and I got to make sure I got to read Spider Island. Then I've got to make sure what's happened after that. So make sure nothing I set up in my story is going to be contradicted with, what's going to come next. And then the editor might come in and say, oh, well, this hasn't come out yet, but we're going to be doing this. So you're going to have to backtrack because, what you're setting up is going to contradict something that's going to come out, in 6 months. That's obviously, I have no control over that. And then it's just a matter of, sort of finding the story, what's compelling within that. And I think that I won't say it's easier because sometimes it's easier to create your own stories because, nobody can tell you that it's wrong. But at the same time, if you're creating them, then, there's a lot of places you can screw it up and you're open for all the criticism in the world. Whereas if you're working on a character that's already established, then you're working at a handicap, but at the same time, you're still working at an advantage because, the character is established. You don't have to worry about creating them from whole cloth. But I mean, I still make sure that I do a whole lot of research, that I want all the stories to be compelling. I want them to all bring in a reader. I want people to, if you've never read that character before, I want you to pick up this book and read it. Maybe my work from something else. Yes, read Daredevil, or yes, read, Legacy of Mandrake, even if you're not familiar with the characters. So I want to make sure that the story, no matter what, is accessible for people.
Do you have a particular type of story that you like to write?
I've been called the poor man's Ed Brubaker because I was doing a lot of crime fiction for a while. And that's fine. I'm a huge fan of Ed Brubaker. I'll be the poor man's Ed Brubaker anytime. And I do like writing crime fiction. And I used to say that I liked, because the first book that I ever wrote was a series called M3 with Vicente Alcazar. And it was like training wheels, because I was saying that, I used to say in interviews that I wanted to tell stories only in the real world because I was too lazy to do world building. So like a lot of the stories that I had done were real world stories. And then I followed up with, a story about Winston Churchill finding a time machine in 1941 and, returning to prehistoric times to recruit dinosaurs for the war effort. So if that's, I did that story with Claire Connolly, and if that's not world building, who the hell knows what is? So I mean, I've sort of gotten out of that, security blanket of, oh, I have to only do real world stories. And especially with like something like Forgotten Home, where, we literally go off planet, and do all kinds of crazy stuff. But, I don't know if there's any particular story that I've, any particular type of story. I've written horror, I've written fantasy, I've written, I have stories that I'm developing currently. I have one story that's like uber, futuristic sci-fi story, but it's anchored to a poem from 1836 rather. So, I'll always find these weird, ways to mash things up. Just because I don't know, I think I'm indecisive. I don't like just one thing, and I like to mix things up. So I think that's what it is. Like, when I did a horror book, 12 Devils Dancing, it wasn't a horror book. It was a murder mystery / thriller, but it had body horror. Forgotten Home was an urban fantasy series, but it was also part YA, and it was also like, family drama. This is, historical fiction, but it's also a murder mystery, but it's also got, high stakes family drama. It's kind of like Knives Out without Chris Evans. But I would say that Violet is probably a bigger jerk than Chris Evans was in that movie. So
do you have a favorite comic book story of all time?
a favorite comic book story of all time. Oh man, that's tough. You know what? I really love the Winter Soldier storyline. I really love the original Infinity Gauntlet. I love Dark Phoenix. I'm literally going over to my bookcase. I really loved the Hawkeye run by David Aja and Matt Fraction.
That is a
Batman
good run.
Nightfall was great. Speaking of Ed Brubaker, Bruce Wayne Murderer and Bruce Wayne Fugitive, I thought was really good. Lady Killer, Joelle Jones, unmatched, fantastic. I love Moon Knight, I really do, and he's had a lot of like really cool. Although Moon Knight's been so like revamped so many times, there's like no one arc that you can really like point to.
It's frustrating.
It is. It is. I would say probably Dark Phoenix. If I had to pick like one, oh man, if I had to pick one, okay, I would probably pick Winter Soldier, of course, by Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting, because, like I said, poor man's Ed Brubaker. Although Kingdom Come is really good too. Oh
Yeah,
man, I'm literally just reading things off my shelf right now.
Well, if it's any consolation, you have amazing taste in comics.
Yeah, I have like one whole Marvel shelf, and then I have one whole DC shelf. And I'm just like looking through all of them. I'm like, yeah, that's good too. And, Messiah Complex. Oh man, House of M. And yeah, I'm going to leave the room before I start listing everything.
It's okay. When was the last time a comic book made you cry?
When was the last time a comic made me cry? Probably the one I'm writing. If I missed a deadline. I don't know. You know what? It might have been. There was a comic that my friend Meredith Finch wrote called Rose. That was really good. Oh, now I know. Okay, so there was an anthology that I got to work on for Image Comics for the Route 93 Foundation. It was a book after the Las Vegas shooting, and reading those comics definitely made me cry. Like after we did the story and everything, and I got a copy of the book, that definitely made me cry.
Is there anybody that comes to mind as either the most inspiring or the most underrated creator in comics that you could think of?
Inspiring, I would say Kelly Sue DeConnick, because when I frantically write her emails at 2 o'clock in the morning, she actually answers them. Not at 2 o'clock in the morning, but she'll answer them. She'll answer them within like 48 hours. Because I'll write them at 2 o'clock in the morning and then I'll regret them all day. And then it'll get to the point where I'll be like, maybe I didn't actually write it, but don't check your sent folder, because then you're going to, oh, you know what? I didn't write it. It was a total hallucination. And then bing, in my inbox is a reply. And I'm like, I did write it. Oh my God. But she's always so gracious and wonderful, even when I'm having like a manic panic attack. She's always been incredible. I don't think Gail Simone's actually sleeps, because every time, no matter what time of day or night, Gail is on Twitter causing a ruckus. The other day she was picking a fight with like the Pickle Syndicate from like Clausen Pickles or something like that. There's nobody is safe from Gail. One of the most incredible people that I've had the grace to work with is Bill Sienkiewicz, and one of the most talented, skilled, humble, kind, just fantastic human beings. Bill is an amazing human being. Somebody who's underrated, Claire Connolly, 9,000%. Claire, I'm just gonna say, Claire's fucking amazing. She is one of the funniest, most creative people I have ever met in my life. And we did a book together. Well, we did the Winston Churchill book together. We did another book called She's a Love Story it was like Romeo and Juliet meets Twilight Zone on a farm. And then we did a book together, an anthology, which was the Romeo and Juliet, which was Cheese, Churchill, colorized. And then we did another story together called Eve the Immortal Lobster. And it's literally Star Trek in space with lobsters.
That is the greatest thing I think I have ever heard.
We were the book Strange Tales, the anthology, was nominated for a Ringo Award last year for best anthology. So you want to talk about, batshit. And Claire is probably one of the most talented people. And so, some people she has a cartoonish style. So some people sort of look at her style and like, it's not really my thing. Like she draws people with four fingers, like that kind of thing. But if you look past that, like if you think about, everybody talks about how Jack Kirby is God. Jack Kirby's anatomy wasn't great, but you look past that for the dynamic poses, for the storytelling, for the way everything flowed. That's what makes, everybody talk about how fantastic Jack Kirby is. Claire has a bunch of, if you go to claireconnollycomics.com, Claire has a bunch of free comics that she has up on her site. And there's a comic called The Last King. And there's a sequence that she draws. And I talk about this. And I actually turned around and showed the sequence in my class at the Kuber School, where and it's funny because I saw Claire did it first. Just saying that, Claire did it first. And then I saw something very similar to it in David Aja's Hawkeye. But, it's the drawing back of a bow and watching the arrow, like panel by panel, but like super thin panels, and watching the arrow go and then hit the mark and everything. And it's just, there's, for a physically static image, there's motion in that, So I think Claire is one of the most underrated artists ever, because there's so much motion and emotion in her comics that she's incredible. She really is. And I would genuinely love the big two to hire her to do something, to hire her to just give her the freedom to do something. Because I think that she would blow everybody away, and it would be like a Bill Sienkiewicz New Mutants kind of reaction.
Nice.
I mean, like if you look at Bill's old stuff, when he was doing Moon Knight and stuff, he was drawing like, Byrne and like Neil Adams and, like house style, but then like New Mutants came out and it was like, whoa, we have never seen anything like this. We don't know if we like it. We don't know if we hate it, but we can't stop looking at it. You know what I mean? Like that Demon Bear cover, So I think Claire really, I think that would be the reaction. It would be like, I can't stop looking at it. And even if somebody says, oh, I dislike it, then that's still, you're getting a reaction. Like you want a reaction from anything that you create, and you want an extreme reaction. The worst thing that you could ever get, the worst reaction you could ever get to any piece of art, whether it's something you write, something you film, something you draw, whatever, is meh.
Yeah.
Like it's just, shrug, didn't really speak to me. If somebody hates something vehemently and they go on the internet and they tear up your comic book and they shout at, their webcam, on YouTube, doesn't matter. That's a great reaction, because whatever you did got a reaction out of them. If somebody goes on their webcam on YouTube and they're crying because it was so beautiful and it touched them so much and it reminded them of their grandfather or whatever, that's a great reaction too. The worst thing that you can get is like, whatever. Like I won't. It didn't really do anything for me. It didn't make me happy. It didn't make me sad. It was just like, okay, way to pass, 20 minutes. So I think Claire's work would definitely, make people open their eyes. And again, she's not a traditional artist in the sense that like, you're going to look at her work and be like, oh, this is kind of cartoonish, this is kind of angular. But does it communicate? Does it say something? Does it reach into you and really pull something out? And I challenge a person on the planet to truly look at the art and really sort of absorb it and then not have a visceral reaction to it. Also, Claire's on my mind because she just emailed me today and she's like, hey, I miss you. Let's get together. So
nice.
We're trying to coordinate, and she's just a fantastic collaborator. But yeah, we're trying to coordinate getting together too, because she only lives, a couple miles away, which is great.
So you ready for the fun part?
Lay it on me.
Excellent. So what's your favorite food?
Most recently, my favorite food of all time would be Sunday dinner at my nonna's house, because she would cook like a traditional Italian dinner, like, 6 or 7 plates. That would be like my favorite food of all time. But she's 95 now, so that's not happening. If I had to say like what's my favorite food now, it would probably be anything Tex-Mex. Like I love, spicy. I like it like a good spicy chili. I like really hot salsa. Nice. So anything like Tex-Mex.
Would you say you're a cat person or a dog person?
I am definitely a cat person. As I stare at him right now, he's practically falling out of his bed because he's so fat.
Nice. What's the best swear word?
Fuck.
Nice.
Fuck is the best swear word. What I say when I stub my toe is shit sticks and motherfuckers.
That's a really good one.
That's my epithet. Shit sticks and motherfuckers. That's my epithet.
Oh, that's beautiful. What inspires you?
My husband's seemingly endless optimism.
Nice.
And blowing raspberries into my fat cat's belly.
That's great. Cats are amazing.
He's so squishy. He's like marshmallow fluff.
So where do you find joy?
Where do I find joy, or
Mm,
in what do I find joy?
either one.
I'm kind of a curmudgeon. Like I'll say like I'm never happy. I'm like sometimes content, but where do I find joy? Probably when I get an email from an artist saying, "Hey, I've got new pages up." Because I like being productive, and I feel like when I get pages, I can then be productive. Um, so I find joy in receiving art and making things.
So you're in a massive cataclysmic battle with the Avengers and Thanos. Thanos
Okay.
is right about ready to snap his fingers and end half the universe. But before this happens, he falls dead of a heart attack, and you're right there. You pick up the Infinity Gauntlet. What's the first thing you do with it?
I start pulling the stones out. I'm not gonna I that is not a responsibility that I need. That is not a responsibility that I need to take. I want nothing to do with that shit. I'm like, I will start pulling them out and throwing them in opposite directions. I don't want anything to do with that. I mean, but because if the monster in me was really like, I'd be like, I want the biggest wheel of cheese or something. and then and then what would happen is I would consume the entire wheel of cheese, and then I would die of my own heart attack from the cholesterol. That would be my instant karmic punishment for using the Infinity Gauntlet. So to
And
avoid
that's
that,
the
I would just
monster
start.
in you. Just the
That's
cheese.
the
That's the
monster in
worst
me.
thing you can think of.
Oh, probably, yeah.
It's great. So you'll remember last time we had a question where we asked what your superpowers would be. Um, but it turns out that in that universe, there is a another cataclysmic event. I guess it's just been a really busy week, and
And
it,
you've had a hell of a Friday, so
yeah, I really have. So you've had a well, anyway, there's a big cataclysmic event, and you have to put together a superhero team. But the good news is that everybody you've ever worked with also has superpowers. Who do you pick?
God, this is horrible because if I pick an artist that like I don't want to like first of all, I'd pick Claire in a heartbeat just because she'd be fun to have on the team. I'd pick Claire. Pick Liana Kangas because she would bring her endless optimism. Um, I would pick. I'd pick Maria Laura Sanapo because she's multilingual. Like she speaks like 4,000 languages. Like she's like a protocol droid. It's ridiculous. And she's so freaking beautiful. I mean, she's a beautiful human being, but she's just so physically beautiful that she would probably stun the entire like army of the opposite side, and they would all just be like asking her out, and then we could just pick them off. So that'd be easy. Uh, I would pick. Um, I'm literally looking at my walls. I'd pick J.K. I'd pick J.K. Woodward because J.K. is an old man and he's a curmudgeon, kind of like me. So we were roommates back at San Diego, and we were like the worst roommates. Like our hotel probably hated us, but but yeah, I would pick J.K. just because like he would just throw paint at people and just like yell like an old curmudgeon. Um, yeah, I think that would be my team, my superhero team.
That's amazing. So what's next for Erica Schultz?
Well, we're finishing up the Deadliest Bouquet. Corolla has started line work on the third chapter. Gab finished the colors on the second chapter already. Fourth chapter is written. Fifth is close to being finished. And we're hoping to get On the Kickstarter, it says that we're getting everything out by January of 2022, but I'm hoping earlier. But I wanted to buy myself just a little time, like God forbid something happened. But we're moving along with that. I have, there's a series that I edited with Mad Cave Studios. That's going to be coming out late this year, so like November, December. And we kind of talked about it on the Mad Cave transmissions, but kind of not. So I don't know what I can say about it. I'll be teaching again at the Kubert School starting in September. I'm also going to be teaching summer session in July. And there's a series that I'm working on with Van Jensen and Anike for a company that hasn't been announced yet. So can't talk about that just yet, but we sometimes talk on Twitter openly, so that's about as much as I could say. And yeah, I mean, I'm just doing what most creators do, which is pitch and cross your fingers and, you know, hope a publisher's like, yeah, I like this, let's do it. So I've got a couple of story ideas sort of on deck that I'm really ready to tackle. Hopefully some publishers will take interest and we can assemble an awesome superhero team.
Erica, you are like the best guest in the entire universe, and I wanted to.
Why? Because I make you do too much editing.
Whatever. No, I was just saying you're great to talk to. You are just so much fun to engage with, and I wanted to thank you for popping on my humble little podcast and just talking. This was fun.
Of course. Look, there. You know how they always say like there's no small parts for actors. There's no small podcasts because every podcaster puts their time, their effort, their skill into it. So, I mean, there's no small podcasts. So your humble, I'm putting it in air quotes, your humble little podcast is, it's, you know, it's you're doing it, you're putting the time in. So, you know, give yourself some credit for that. But yeah, I mean, anytime, you know, I'm perfectly fine at any time to just randomly wax poetic about God knows what. You know, why not?
Sure.
I don't mind the way my voice sounds to myself. I just hate the way it sounds to everybody else.
Right on. So where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter at erica-schultz42. I'm on Instagram at erica-schultz-writes, WRITES. My website is erica-schultz-writes.com. If you want to follow the Deadliest Bouquet, you can follow us on Twitter at deadly_bouquet or on Instagram, the Deadliest Bouquet comic. Our Kickstarter has 10 more days. We did reach our $20,000 funding goal. We are now working toward our $24,000 stretch goal because Adriana Mello, who is a fantastic Eisner Award-winning artist, is going to be doing a print, and that is our stretch goal. And I really, really, really want to get this print out to everybody. So if you have not already, I know you did, Eva, thank you. So to any of your listeners, go to Kickstarter, look up the Deadliest Bouquet, or even easier, go to my Twitter at erica-schultz42, click the link in the bio. You can support at $1. You can support at $85 is the highest I have left because everything else. Or if you're a retailer, you can give me $100 and I'll give you a bunch of books to sell. But yeah, we're really pushing toward our Adriana Mello goal. And she posted a little video on Twitter earlier tonight of her working on it on her Cintiq. And around her camera goes around the back of her Cintiq, and you can see her daughter's 2 kittens sleeping. And so, but that the first couple of frames and the last couple of frames, you can see that she's working on the Deadliest Bouquet print with the 3 sisters, Poppy, Violet, and Rose. So I'm pretty excited about that. And we already have a print by Elaine Grace. And, you know, all the crazy, fantastic things that we have going on for this book. The cover of the book is by Kevin Wada. It's a 120-page graphic novel. Like, all 5 chapters are going to be there. You're going to get the whole book. And yeah, I mean, it is a fun story. This story actually might make people cry. Maybe. I'm not sure.
And that's it, my babies. It's time to close the show. I wanted to thank you for being gorgeous, being valid, and living your best life. We couldn't do this humble little podcast without you, and I appreciate all the support we get. This episode was part of Batch 38. Titular Characters is a show about the things we love. It's produced and hosted by the adorable Eva Webb. That's me. Opening theme by Antonia Marquis. Closing theme by Mikey Flash of Speed Force Music. The dreamy announcer guy is Donnie Underwood, and he's amazing. We love him. So, have you thought about supporting the show? There are tons of ways to do it. You could show your support by following me at Eva is Adorable, because I am, on Twitter. Leaving us a review on Apple Podcast, CastBox, or Podchaser. And if you're feeling like you want to help out financially, you can visit us at buymeacoffee.com/EvaIsAdorable. There, you can donate as little as $1, and all proceeds go towards the cost of producing and hosting this show. Every little bit helps, and you are amazing for even considering it. Anyway, babies, that's all we got. Join us next time for another death-defying adventure in cyberspace. Oh, and when you do, bring candy. Love yas.